replicate what happens with volcanoes using existing technologies relatively cheaply, relatively quickly, and it would make a pretty immediate dent in one of the major challenges attached to climate change, which is global atmospheric temperature increase. So those are the upsides. You can see why these sorts of technologies are so enticing. You can see, given the political struggles that we're having coming to grips with climate change, why people might point to these sorts of options. But as with any complex conversation, there are downsides. Now, I take very seriously the admonition of physicist Freeman Dyson when it comes to talking about these sorts of concerns about big technologies, either to stand opposed or to push them forward. You are gambling with lives. This ultimately, again, is a question about people. This at the most common talked about idea of putting sulfate particles into the stratosphere. When Mount Pinatubo erupted, this is a photograph of Mount Pinatubo erupting in the Philippines in the early 1990s, as well as cooling global average temperatures, there's lots of good science which suggests that the sulfate particles led to a disruption of monsoon rains in the Asian subcontinent, affecting Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. Now, more than 1 billion people depend on those monsoon rains for their drinking water, depend on the availability of that rainfall for food production. And so this idea that we might deploy sulfate particles even in a regional way, say over the United States, in such a fashion that it might disrupt rainfall and other weather and climatic patterns in other parts of the world is deeply, deeply troubling. The climate system is complicated. And another piece of this is that we may not know if these are having the desired effect unless they're deployed at scale for a very, very long time. Turn out to be the most just form of response. But at the moment, we're not talking about justice enough in this conversation. We're not getting to the ethical and justice and political considerations that need to be paid attention to. This is no longer an abstract scientific conversation. This has to, more and more, be a conversation in the realm of politics, ethics, governance, and equity. Lest we be drawn down a path to a false solution. At the moment, lots of civil society organizations, large green groups, social justice and human rights groups don't want to talk about geoengineering for fear of giving it unwanted legitimacy.
See the silvery white skies, which we see almost every morning in Northern California, the undefined, hazy, dirty clouds, skies full of sprayed aerosols is what we're looking at. These are aerosol clouds. And remember, clouds should be white, the sky should be blue. It's what it used to be. Find some old pictures and take a look. And remember that the express goal of climate engineering is to blot out the sun, to fill the atmosphere with these light-scattering particles, to block some of the incoming thermal radiation. Cataclysmic effects, but those in power don't seem to care. So, again, a mountain of toxic metals falling on all of us. Medical statistics are showing exactly what we would expect to see from this. All the human diseases that are related to these metals are going absolutely off the charts. As mentioned before, autism in the last 40 years has gone from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 47. That's over a 10,000% increase in autism. And now we have one of the most recognized institutions for research on the planet, MIT, stating that in less than 10 years, we will see 1 in 2 children with autism. Alzheimer's, 1 in 3 in the continental US dies with Alzheimer's and/or dementia. Not dies from it, but dies with it. All of us are becoming dumber by the day. It's not a joke. It's not a metaphor. It's a fact. Our cognitive ability is being damaged by the toxic particulates we are all inhaling.
I've done studies in Siskiyou County. They're at 20% of normal. The aquatic insects basically made a nosedive in 2006 to about 20% of normal. So far this year, I've sampled 200 trout stomachs. 98% of them are empty. So sorry about the trout fishing, fellows. The mayflies, stoneflies, dipterus, and caddisflies are damn near gone. The terrestrial sampling is down to about 20% of normal, except for pest species like ants. We're seeing a loss of major bird species, and as the gentleman said, The ecosystem is unraveling, and Audubon's been telling you that for years.
The materials that are going into the environment right now, aluminum oxide nanoparticles and barium nanoparticles, these just happen to be the same materials that they use in nanothermate explosives. And so when this stuff settles down out of the air into the environment, it is small enough to be absorbed through the root structure of the trees in the forest. And so when there's a forest fire, and there will be a forest fire, those fires burn dramatically hotter. The point is that the cost of firefighting, the cost in the healthcare system have nearly doubled in the last 10 years. The amount of acreage is lost because of fires. The impact on human health is dramatic.
I personally tested water and aluminum, and I found aluminum had 47 times the normal expected amounts. Strontium had 10 to 20 times the amounts. Barium was 20 times.